We are going to start with the second day of the second edition of the Digital Agriculture Week. For those of you who are joining us online, my name is Federico Bert, and I am the person responsible to coordinate the topics of digitalization of agriculture at ICA. I would like to welcome Manuel Perez Armentero from Veolia, one of our strategic partners, to carry out this event. And so now, without further ado, we're going to start with the first block of the second day. For those of us who are following online, we are broadcasting from San Jose, Costa Rica at ICA's headquarters. In the headquarters at ICA, we are around 45 people present here from different places of the Americas and representing different organizations, both public and private, AgTechs from the Americas. They're representatives of the strategic partners and different farmers associations, investment funds, universities, and education centers, particularly from Ecuador. And for those of you who are following us online, welcome. I would also like to introduce, before moving into the panel, Teresita Di Marco. For some reason, Teresita is not being able to start her camera, but she's here joining us today. Worked closely with Teresita in the development of this panel. She is part of the Yield Lab Institute and one of the organizations that is a strategic partner of ICA. So welcome, Teresita. Hopefully you'll be able to get your camera on. If not, we will be able to listen to you. And we were able to listen to you before. So together with Teresita, we will be conducting this panel. And right now, this panel will take a bit over an hour. It is focused on private funding. That's how we call it. But we're going to talk about digital innovation ecosystems and investment funds. And this is a truly great panel, an amazing panel. We just cannot not say that. So we would like to thank Lina Cuervo, who is the managing partner and co-founder of Cube Ventures. Cube is pretty much a venture capital company that finances companies in their early stages in Latin America. Lina is really passionate about developing companies, helping companies with a social economic impact. Then we have Tommy Peña from the Yield Lab. Thank you for joining us. Juan Diego Mejia, who is investors leader from Ag Center Agri-Foods Tech in Colombia. Probably Juan Diego will let us know more about it during his intervention. And Cristian Quiñones, he is the managing partner and co-founder of Innogen Capital from El Salvador. So we have a truly diverse group with very interesting perspectives joining us today. As we mentioned before, the idea is that together with the specialists, we can understand better what they do, looking at the new ecosystems that have emerged and also know the origin of many of the new innovations, what venture capitals are looking at in the present and the future, particularly regarding AgTechs. And we will have a chance to learn together. We'll have some takeaway lessons, and we will have a first introduction or introduction remarks by each of the panel members, and then we will have a free discussion that's still going to be organized so that we can keep mind of time. And so now we will give the floor to our guests. Oh, thank you, Federico. We have been working with the panel members to try to show and what's available for funding in the region. And so let's begin with the panel. Great. Thank you. So, Lina, we're going to ask you to speak first. If you need to share any slides, you just need to do so with Zoom's tool. Go ahead, Lina. The floor is yours. Thank you. It is a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to share a presentation and hopefully I won't bore you. In the meantime, I'm going to let you know briefly who we are, what is our vision of the ecosystem, and how we all become involved in this topic. So, as you can see, we are a venture capital company that tries to accelerate companies at their early stages. This is entrepreneurs who are kind of disconnected from the ecosystem with large ideas, with passion, with willingness to solve problems. And we are in the middle of the ecosystem through the transfers of knowledge, skills, capabilities generated within our team and our partners, and also through capital. So we connect these startups with large investors. We have a network of over 200 companies related to us and many good partners that help us potentialize this. We are an organization that thinks about finance first, and we would like to promote startups that have an accelerated economic growth based on technology, but that are mission driven. And that means that we want to have a social impact on the organization. We have a particular focus on gender equality. And you probably wonder why, because this does have an impact on the agricultural sector. And the idea is that we want to close gaps and we are aligned to sustainable development goals in gender equality, so that we try to invest in 50 companies that are technology based and that are agnostic in the industry. Why? Because we think of early stages and we want to support the startup in try to pivot in their idea. And that's why they may be a fintech and they may be then different types of companies. So we have invested in organizations that promote the growth at the regional level. We have 107 startups across 9 countries, and 62% of the companies have been founded by women. We have Flake Green that already promotes the financing organizations that promote the use of products for consumption that are being reused. We have Six Visa, and we have Guardian Kids that protect Guardian Kids that prevent kids from being at harm through the media. And so these many of those who are involved in this have the idea of a quick growth in the venture capital, also an increase at a fast growth in the digitalization of our economies. And we have seen that by increasing in the past 5 years. And the pandemic allowed us to digitalize many of the solutions and change the way we worked. We also realize that we are an economic bloc that has a major impact at the regional level. And if we get together as a global economy, from the America standpoint, we can then have a greater impact at the world level. The impact in gender is quite important for us. Less than 10% of financing goes to women, and this is a very strong inequality. But with the companies that have gender equality have a greater return of capital, and they becomes much stronger. We also manage gender equality with GDP. If we were to attain gender equality, GDP will increase greatly worldwide. And we know that by including women in politics and in other realms, that would promote peace, but it will also reduce the damage that we are causing to our ecosystems as such. We're agnostic in the industry because of what we said before, but we help the development of startups and new industries. We have seen a growth in tech, in food tech, in biotech, and in other organizations. It is normal for us to see fintech and e-commerce as one of the key factors that allow us to have visibility and greater potential for growth, as we have seen in the past 10 years, which is the duration that the ecosystem has had. But we need to keep our eyes also on other companies that may be strong, like the agricultural sector, health, and even public policies. In terms of AgTech, this is what it looks like by 2019, how the organization is distributed regionally. This gives us a huge advantage and is linked to the development that the region has had in the technological basis, the market where it is, and the needs in this market. These are some of the countries that have the greatest exports of coffee and orange juice. And then we have Colombia and Mexico as well here. AgTech sees a fertile ground to develop some technology, some companies based on incubators, accelerators, and capital funds. We can have technology to develop growth and develop solutions based on venture capital, like the one we have and others in the panel have. So we have a gap in gender. Only 11% of companies in AgTech have been founded by women. But we see that women have an interesting drive in generating genetics, innovative products in the food realm, and also they have a focus on well-being. They want to have safe and nutritional foods, and they also have an important a gear towards the environment and protecting the environment. In Colombia, we have eco solutions and we are growing here. There are some of the conversations that we have had with Teresita, and within our organization, we have another organization called CHAC that through greenhouses, we try to have greenhouses in urban areas, reducing the use of water and pesticides, increasing the production, and also leading a decrease in greenhouse of gases due to transportation. So these organizations are working in Argentina, Brazil, and Colombia in promoting this through large trade chains, commerce uh, chains. And so we know that the corporate sector is quite motivated in all of this. We have others that are located in Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia. That's Fruana. What they want is to give access to fair prices for farmers and reduce the gap in the purchase, and to give also fair prices to restaurant owners that are focused on small kind of restaurants that can give then, and all of them can benefit economically. So this is our team. We are entrepreneurs that we have worked internet with international companies, and that's why we understand what the problems that startups may have, and we want to, and we believe in transferring knowledge and following up each step by step what entrepreneurs do. And so we may find talent in the rural area, but all they need is somebody to accompany them and give them access to capital so that they can develop those solutions. Then they have an impact on the ecosystem. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Lina. Very specific and clear presentation, very concrete. So, Tere, yeah, we can see you now. Awesome. So now let's move on to Juan Diego, a brief introduction of Juan Diego, and then we'll have the Q&A. Thank you. Let me, 1 second, share my screen.
Ahí pueden ver pantalla.
Can you see my screen? Yes?
Listo. Perfecto. Pues Federico, nada, primero
So, Federico, I would like to thank ICA for the invitation. It is a great pleasure for all of us to present Ag Center, what we've been doing, what we have found in the agri-tech ecosystem in Colombia, and what have been our experiences and what we expect to see in this hub. So Ag Center is an agri-food tech hub we seek to impact favorably the agricultural sector in Colombia. And we have realized that in the past century, technology, innovation, and access to information in Colombia has increased exponentially. But in Colombia, still, we are lagging behind greatly with regards to that adoption of technology and the use of technology to increase productivity. In the picture taken in 1920 and the picture taken in 2023 are very similar. Maybe you see the one is black and white, the other one is a color picture, but you can see that our producers still look pretty much the same and they're still lagging behind with regards to the technological production. And this is what we want to something to this one we want them to catch up in the short term. So agriculture represents 7% of GDP in Colombia, is the sixth production sector in the country. In the ranking of productivity in FAO, we occupy rank number 95 out of 190 countries, and the ranking of attractivity in the agricultural context, we have the ranking 130, and according to the World Bank, we are ranking 106 of 200 and some. So this is similar to the slide shown by my colleague. Agriculture needs agriculture. Colombia has have helped about 5% of agri-food tech startups in Latin America and more than 10% of the investment. Okay, we don't have specialized funds in the country to be invested in agri-food tech. Many of them are agnostic, as mentioned before, and many of them have been doing some interesting investments. What we want to do is to start help the ecosystem and the market in Latin America is $300 billion, and the investment in 2022 was of 900 million US dollars. So Accenture has a mega for 2030 that is to be the largest and most robust agri-food tech hub in the Andean region to enable this ecosystems in a sustainable way and that it can attract capital. So we want to follow up and articulate a number of companies so that we can accomplish this goal that we have established for ourselves for 2030. We want to be a builder of the ecosystem. We want to increase the number of startups in Colombia that can be available to the market and that may be attractive for those public and private investors in Latin America and worldwide. We think that 50% of those 1,000 startups that may be generated in the country can have the Accenture seal or may have undergone or gone through some of the programs that we have. We also want to think about sustainability and leverage a capital of over $20 million to be some benchmarks at the Colombian Latin American level. We want to articulate with around 200,000 key players at the national international level to have a rural impact, of course, in producers. We want to link more than 2 million producers in the forthcoming 7 years. And that's our goal, and to be a node for the world ecosystem. So to have more than 100 partners at the national international levels that can help us attain our objectives. So who do we serve? Startups with a minimum viable product that may want to have an impact in the market in Latin America, also transforming and producing companies that would like to diversify and innovate faster and complying with their development goals, also to articulate investors that believe in profitability and the impact that this ecosystem of agri-food tech may have. That's been an important task that we have undertaken since we started. And these other players, and by these other players, we're talking about the academia, development centers, and other hubs that may help us leverage innovation in this agri-food system. Accenture is divided into four main pillars or impact lines that respond to the articulation of each of those players that we already mentioned. We have a line for startups. In that startups line, we offer three services. The first one is the strengthening and acceleration of the company that are starting constantly in the country to link startups with producers and companies or within startups. For us, it is crucial to generate those cocktails of value proposals for different startups so that they can differentiate themselves in the market and they can be more competitive in the market as well, going beyond the Colombian market so they can have a more Latin American view or perspective or world perspective. If and also to help them and help them validate this market. And many of the startups require a validation of their idea and their prototype of their minimum viable product. So that's what we do. We help them to do that as fast as possible and pivoting their business uh, plans and helping them restructure them whenever needed. Then, in the line of companies and producers, we do value connections or networks. We have open innovation programs with different companies that, based on their needs, they seek to see some innovation opportunities that may be interesting to them, that may help them leverage their businesses. And we also have a service of the acceleration of intra-entrepreneurships. So we want some of their businesses or their new companies and business models that are not necessarily that are their own to turn into spin-offs so that they make sense in the market and we can accompany them in this acceleration process. In the investors line, we have different actions. One is raising capital for funds and for investment mechanisms focused on the agricultural sector, and that's where we want to be in the agri-food tech. And we also have the scouting of startups for investment. We do a search of we with the knowledge that we have of the Colombian ecosystem. Strategically, we want to mobilize and present before the different investment mechanisms the way to optimize the investment and for this investment to take place. So it's not like to have 500 pits to get an investment, but with based on our knowledge that we have of them and their sources of financing to guide them adequately so that this investment can happen in the short term. And we also have an ecosystem line that basically has four services. The first one is that we generate an annual report of the agri-food tech sector in Colombia. So we want to be acknowledged as in the region as that institution that generates and has real-time data and gets and knows the ecosystem well. Then to have local and international events where we can communicate the outcomes and then we can articulate with all the different players that we are in contact with within the different lines to have a membership by the community so that the community can feel a part of this dynamic that we are trying to build and helping to build. And then we also have a program for the transference of knowledge and acquisition of knowledge so that the startups and that the entrepreneurs may need at the uh, company level and some other training sessions that we can give them specifically. Some of the outcomes of the out of the 7 months that we have in operation. So we have 25 startups, and we have been able to work in a very coordinated manner, and we have these indicators of impact in this very new hub that we are representing now. And in Colombia, we have around 250 startups mapped. We still have a long way to go there. We know that in Colombia, there are at least twice as many startups that are just getting started. And that's why it is important for them to be visualized, to be accompanied in this process that I mentioned before. We also work with 13 companies that are uh, uh, in different places in Latin America. We have connected with different opportunities. It's been something complicated, even connecting them with Colombian startups because they might not comply with their requirements in terms of impact and quality. So, together with these partners, we have been able to bring them closer together to Latin American opportunities that are becoming available to benefit both parties, the startups and these other companies. in the investors line, we have 169, 170 investors mapped. We call this financing sources investors. And so we have started doing some connections, 44 value connections already with startups, and we have 8 uh, accompanying agreements signed with startups in this accelerating program that have believed in us and they want us to join them in this process.
In the ecosystem, we have more than uh, we have a large number of companies involved in all of this. Okay, who created or formed the center at the beginning? Well, AgriLink, they have a Colombian fair and Latin American four. They are the creators of the fair, and we see ourselves as the institution that helps them ensure that what is shown at the fair can really be taken to the Colombian rural areas, and that it is not just on a showcase. We really want to implement and improve the productivity in the field. The University of Antioch also bet on us, Pro Antioquia, which is a center that articulates the business sector from Antioquia within the country and the local government of Antioquia. This was the first organization that invested in the center, the first entity that invested in this our center. These are some of the benchmarks we have. These are our contacts. These are different organizations worldwide. We have Start Life. We have Artec Garage. We want to begin to working with. In the bill, we have been working on several activities. Though it is basically Ag Center. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you for being leading in the innovation and undertakings of the agri-food sector in Colombia. We are always willing to work together to further enable our work. Thank you. Thank you, Juan Diego. We offer the floor now to Tomás. Go ahead, Tommy, for your comments.
Ahí está, ¿me escuchan? Muchas gracias. Mi nombre es Tomás Peña.
Thank you. My name is Tomás Peña. I am managing partner of Yield Lab Latam, which started in 2017 with the strong support of the St. Louis community, consisting of 35 people that came to Buenos Aires and Rosario to put this AgTech system together. That was very interesting because it led to a very important culture. There have been 5 years of AgTech week. They will be coming to Rosario and to Buenos Aires, and that has been a very interesting activity. We have the Yield Lab Latam now with different funds. We have invested for 3 years, and over those 3 years, what was interesting was basically a leap of faith when you tell the market that there will be more than 300 startups in Argentina. Those numbers, in fact, have grown even stronger. But anyway, we replicated that in different areas. We worked with AgTech Garage, and as of that second fund, a 1-year fund, Brazilian and Argentinian, very successful. We were able to invest in a couple of companies that grew exponentially and that have had more than a 30% yield. Last year in Sao Paulo, we launched another fund, first closing 15 million in July 2022. And this year, we just announced a second closing 10 million more, with investors such as Bimbo, the Inter-American Development Bank, and Fondo de Fondos. We are part of a global network. We can see it represented here by our friend Brandon Day, director of the ULab Institute. He is basically the one that helps us make sense of this partnership, because we are four independent funds that manage different investment policies that are adjusted to the market. So it is very interesting to talk about in greater detail some other days, but there is great difference among the markets, not only in the investors and in needs, but also in the startups in Europe. Today we have 55 million euros, 3,000 and some startups mapped with a completely different vision from the 1,800 we have mapped for Latin America. In the United States, they are much more technical focused, more bio-focused. In Latin America, they are more digital, as could be the people from eCrop here. Whereas in Asia Pacific, the market there has a lot more competition, a significant amount more funds. In Singapore, they are working very hard for this to become a reality. We have 5 years of history, more than $120 million, $125 million in 75 investments worldwide. And that has given us access to information and a much broader market vision. Our market perspective, we have tried to open up in Africa, and the hope is that the model for Rosario can be replicated in Africa. And last week we had the honor of having the presence of Brandon and 39 North in Querétaro, where we launched a program. There were more than 70 people involved in this ecosystem. We will see some interesting numbers, as Lida, as well as Juan Diego showed. Mexico, as the 12th power in the world, the main exporter of produce to the United States, they have a small percentage of startups. So there's a big space for this to change. For this, we have a multicultural, a multidisciplinary team, 12 people that Santiago Murta, basically working with Camila and Kiram since 2017. We have people in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Chile, and Roberto Viton, our partner in Luxembourg, who is also a partner of GLAB Europe. Oops, excuse me. This wrong slide. Well, we believe this is a systemic a paradigm shift. Before, things were centralized. Now they are distributed. If we look at the numbers for Latin America, when I started with a startup in 2011 and several investors at the beginning, there were $140 million for all of Latin America's investment. The last 3 years, the aggregate is $23 billion. This has created a big challenge, and this is very important for policymakers that are gathered together to realize that the magnitude of the growth, from 140 to 23 billion. We have been in the market for so long, but it is important to see the ecosystemic effort here, the participatory effort. Basically, we need to help the startups to obtain the necessary human resources, because there are not that many specialists in human resources. Although there are $23 billion, 80% of this is for human resources. 60% of startups fail because of human resources and their lack thereof. So basically, startups are wondering, how do I attract people? How do I retain them? How can I change the culture when we go from being 10% to 100 or to 1,000? So how can we ensure that startups that are always looking for something new, and as I said in Querétaro the other day, the seekers, the ones that are looking for change, those that do not feel at ease with what they see in the agro world. This is an enormous opportunity. There's limited digitalization there. But so if we start to think at the WhatsApp level, it is perhaps not that low. WhatsApp could perfectly well be an ag tech tool. This is a means of communication that provides permanent access, very high levels of adoption throughout Latin America. And that is a channel to distribute digital materials, top level. So if we look at the partnerships we have entered into with different organizations, we have partnerships, Actex Garage, Nestors, INIA, which is a technical agricultural agency of the Chilean government. And this has generated good and bad experience. The good ones is that there's a team in Rancagua that has been working with us for 3 years. And the lessons learned with the INIA basically is how to better approach the scientific people, the technical people, how to teach them that their scientific and technical knowledge is just as important as reaching the marketplace, how to have a good team. So those are the lessons we have been learning over the years. In Mexico, we are about to announce a partnership with a top-level university. We are working on the final details, and the ag sector was inspired by a trip made by the Colombian people to St. Louis, and they came back with all the desire. The agri-league people wanted to, Ricardo Jaramillo particularly worked on such an important project, fundamental project, and it still prevails over time. Agro needs significant investors, a lot of people like Juan Diego Ag Centers, people committed to help, people committed to be committed and to understand not only the person, because this is very humanistic, but also to support the systemic change. This is an opportunity not often seen for Latin America. As Argentinian and Latin American, I am always struck by the fact that the main ag tech event in the world starts in London and then moves to San Francisco and then to Singapore. And lastly, it comes to Latin America. This is something that we as leaders have to rethink whether this, what we have to do amongst us all, so that instead of being last, we should be considered the third power. Basically, play with this, all of this, but it is important to start to insist on this. 30% of the water reserves in the world are here. So, and this is something of a great passion for us is at Yield Lab is the level of talent we have. How can we ensure that there's all this knowledge and expertise does not leave this area? All our people from Uruguay, our people from Colombia, all the support from the government, we do not want them to leave. How can we ensure that the teams that grow, like G. Cropper is growing and Matias is there learning about this, how can they open up without having to move to the United States, for example? How can we ensure that this innovation be a pride and specialization of Latin America? We have a great potential. If we examine the rural areas, we have seen so much work to be done, all this decentralized work. We need to have methodologies that can grow exponentially. This is difficult to see, but this shows who the investors are. The investors in food, in finance, in Argentina, Mexico, Brazil, Chile. The complexity, notice here, the complexity of an ag tech. Ag tech is not just technical, agronomic improvements or improvements in crops or anything like this. This is in specific areas for an agronomist can understand. No, this is a whole value chain. We noticed the growth of AgTechs over the last few years. In 2011, there were 240, and now we're talking about more than 1,800. That is the latest figure. So when we talk about this distribution, where we see that Mexico and Central America have much more to grow. This is one thing that we are very proud and happy of. And then is that we have been able to review more than 900 startups. We recognize we work with a methodology being closer to the startup and close to the investor. We see a big difference here in supply and demand, and many startups are trying to understand what the user wants. Oftentimes, the users are trying to understand how to connect to the startup. But the main player in all of this game strongly is the grower, the producer, not as a receiver of technology, but instead a generator of technology. And on the digital side, there is more work to be done. When we look at this, the distribution of the startups, we see so much attention still on innovation on the farm, in the farm, and very few beyond the gate. When we see the most important elements, we have the water as an asset, the carbon markets, sustainable regenerative agriculture, the possibility of generating connections through digitalization or digital enablers here. And I believe that a very clear way to say this is that I do not know if we should focus so much on the plant, but instead on the money, so that the processes are more sustainable. We receive credit for implementing best practices. There is work to be done here. We have 3 investment funds, 19 portfolio companies, $36 million under management, 7 countries with portfolios deployed, more than 700 employees with $45 million raised. Quickly, let us see the existing portfolios. We can see this map distributed by our companies, and we see there's still work to be done in commercial and big data. And we can also see we are distributed throughout Latin America. There's a big opportunity today to work in collaboration. And we applaud the effort made by Juan Diego at Ag Center. We believe this is fundamental for us to continue strongly, to follow strongly what is happening in Colombia. We are trying to copy that model, using it as an example in Mexico, in Peru. We need to rethink of the INEA model through the experience of Ag Center. The government of Uruguay is also helping. Well, with Brazil, we have been replicating this with different players. In Brazil, we see there's a huge potential to add these models. So the truth is, we are very excited, very grateful for the invitation. And I wonder whether we will move later to questions or if there are any other questions. Thank you, Tommy. We thank you very much for your participation here and for the support of the Yield Lab. We offer the floor to Christian, and after that, we will open up to questions and thoughts. There have been very powerful messages that are worth highlighting. Christian, the floor is yours now. Thank you very much, Federico. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you. Mine is a very short presentation, just to put in context who we are. I will try to keep it short. I wonder whether you can see my screen. Not yet, but it's coming up. Oh, no, now we see your desktop. Okay, now? Okay, it's getting better. Very good. Now, perfect. Great. Allow me to start. Inogen Capital is a Salvadoran organization that started in 2018 as a result of a family group with more than 120 years operating in Central America. And with operations in Peru, we come from a farming business, a coffee production, as well as sugar. The company is called AgriCell. And as many of the family businesses in Latin America, and particularly in Central America, most are related to agriculture. It requires another step to diversify, to be processed, but most of the families come from a farming business or agriculture related. So we decided to launch a third fund focused on Central America, seeking three pillars. Obviously, Central America is one of the last places in Latin America where venture capital is quite new. This is an investment vehicle that is quite recent and requires a lot of space, a lot of capital for to push these companies. We have a couple of success stories of success, Delivery Euro and Delivery U, captured several years ago, as well as others similar ones. The fund will be invested in this region, $10 million. For the time being, there is no other fund focused on Central America, only to invest in the region. We are working with a pre-series to pre-seed to pre-series A, is expecting a return on investment for our funders because we will be working with the corporate sector here. These are the sectors we will focus on. As I mentioned, all families come from this type of industry. We have seen a lot of studies in El Salvador and in Central America, particularly in coffee plantations, where there is a strong blow on production of those seasonal growers, because youth, at least in those counties, young people no longer want to continue in this area, not even helping their parents. Whether these youngsters have a one-way, the world in their hands, and they do not want to continue harvesting sugar cane or coffee. They want to be much more efficient. They want to bring in technology to optimize those resources. And definitely, at least in Central America, we expect a significant drop in the agriculture sector. That is precisely why we want to bet so much on this pillar in Central America. These are our roots. But with the agriculture reform in El Salvador, at least, we lost the thrust of agriculture and we became a country more focused on services than on produce. The fund is supported by USAID. This helps us have a zero administrative cost. The 5 million have been raised. We are partnering with a cluster called Impact Hub, and they will help us with the acceleration of these companies and will help us with the filtering. We will give a lot of support to all these companies through capital, through growth strategies, fundraising, capital governance. That is also another very important area that a company may need in such new markets and with such new ecosystems, so that they can be in line with companies in Colombia and in Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. So we want people that are very well trained. I am not going to cover all this information, but I just wanted to explain briefly our metrics, our impact metrics. We are very much interested in STEM, in gender. We want to meet several UN SDGs. Not only are these upon request of the USAID, but we consider this as a fund, and we should be part of the DNA of any fund, using these metrics and having these metrics included in their reports. Here we can see, let me go through this. This is my team. We are 3 partners, Rodrigo, Fernando, and myself. We are the co-founders, and our investor relations and financial analysts are here. This is the track record of the 2 other funds. To date, we have funds 1 and 2, 19 investments total. This is a total of 60 million in capital that are being handled, plus what we hope will take us to 20-some million in capital for Latin America. These are some of the companies that have been a great success. I am sure you know Foodology, Remittances, and Woodwood. We have not yet invested in AgTechs. I will be very honest. We have not been able to do it because we have not yet seen the opportunity, nor do we have the expertise. We are studying that and analyzing this opportunities for Central America. We have spoken to Tomas in the past, and we have accepted his word of the support of Yield Lab to move forward with something very interesting. And with this, I will end my presentation. I know we will not.
Lo que hacemos de noche. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Cristian. Un placer tenerte aquí. Tenemos algunos minutos para intercambio y preguntas. Tenemos con Tere anotadas algunas reflexiones y preguntas, pero quisiéramos aprovechar parte de los minutos que tenemos para dar la chance a quienes están aquí presentes o participando de modo virtual, por si quisieran hacer alguna pregunta o algún comentario, alguna reacción a lo que nos presentaron y nos contaron los panelistas. Adelante, Marta. Si podés presentarte muy brevemente, Marta, antes de...
Mi nombre es Marta
comentario.
Montoya, soy la CEO de AG Tools, datos de mercado para el mundo. Mi pregunta es, los fondos presentados, el retorno de inversión, generalmente los fondos necesitan, o eso es lo que escuchamos, 20-30% de retorno. ¿La curva en Latinoamérica es igual que en Estados Unidos, rápida o es más lenta? Y si los fondos tienen más paciencia para agricultura, no sé lo demás, pero en agricultura.
Quien quiera o quienes quieran dar una respuesta a Marta.
Si querés, yo
Adelante,
puedo
Tommy.
responder algo. Yo me defino como una persona ansiosa y mis inversores también. No sé qué significa ser paciente. Paciente es ayudar a las startups a crecer bien, sólidamente, lo más rápido posible. Nosotros, como fondo de inversión, tenemos el mandato de tener estos rendimientos que nos dice Marta, pero hay muchas maneras de crecer sólidamente y también creer mucho en el efecto hockey stick, ¿no? Digamos, hemos visto empresas que de repente en marzo están bajando gente y en abril están volviendo a contratar porque le entraron $5 millones. Digamos, esto es el propio negocio del venture capital. Digamos, nosotros estamos trabajando mucho en una tropicalización de ese venture capital, adaptando a Latinoamérica, tratando de dar los rendimientos que se tienen que dar. Pero por eso también nos definimos como entrepreneur
Fine.
friendly, ¿no? Amigos de los emprendedores.
As our front of activity, we cannot assume risk or make an entrepreneur or startup to take risk because of a given variable. Let us take this direction, and if things go wrong, well, tough luck. So that is not what we want. There are 128 investments, one single write-off at a given company in the United States. That is patient capital, but with good returns. This is very close to patient capital. But startups know that they ask for money from a venture capital, and I do not think that is fair to have this question because, okay, the startup can voluntarily approach an investor that has a mandate. This is not an innocent person. We know what we are all getting involved in, what we're signing up for. But I agree, Marta, that we do need tropicalization here, but that tropicalization can only be achieved by talking all of us together.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Any brief comments? Otherwise, I'm just... Olga? Yes, Olga, go ahead. Please introduce yourself first. Good morning. My name is Olga Ayala. I work with the Colombian Federation of Livestock Producers in terms of science, technology, and innovation. I would like to know if you have any experience with dairy products or livestock products with regards to this new vision. Very well. Let's give this question to Juan Diego, maybe? Or Luis Diego? Juan Diego, sorry. Yes. In Ag Center, we have been working with a number of solutions that are related to livestock, particularly in applications of the traceability and management of the farms. We have a startup known as Trasi. Trasi is a startup that works in livestock, handles the farm, and gathers the information. And with that data, they help the producer to optimize their management. And from the corporates, we are working with Alquería. Alquería presented a couple of challenges that they have in terms of livestock. And what we have accomplished was to put them together with Latin American startups that may help them. Of course, I'm here at your service if you need some more specific information with regards to those situations or examples that we have. Lina, in comments. We can say that we are one of the organizations who's trying to use blockchain in livestock. I believe that one of the greatest challenges that we have faced have to do with what Juan Diego was mentioning. How can regulations and corporations can help develop this technology further, or at least implement what there is? So right now we're only focused on the production of new foods, but the use for the development of the ecosystem as such. So what I would like to promote is how all the different organizations can link and work together for the correct implementation of these processes. Because I believe there are ways to generate implementation working hand in hand with producers that may be passionate about all this, but that may be facing a certain challenges that prevent them from moving forward. So in this case, this company changed the pathway of their solutions, and they still understood that there's an opportunity there, and maybe by talking with the federation, we were going to be able to find a solution. Thank you, Lina. I don't have any other hands raised, so I am going to ask a question. It's just a question, not a comment. Agriculture worldwide, and particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean, is very diverse for different reasons. Thinking about the type of producers, the type of productions, the geographies, So oftentimes we see that there are certain developments that may be considered in the long run as tactics that may be useful but do not have the potential scaling up that the type of startups have. So my question to see whether you have an answer for this is that it's okay that they not be something likable by VCs, but what would you recommend? What would you suggest to the other ecosystems and decision makers so that those initiatives that may be interesting and useful for a certain small segment can then be also feasible or may have an opportunity, a chance to be developed? That's it. Tommy. Well, that's a difficult question. We need to understand that the IPI economy is an economy where, for example, Mercedes-Benz says, I'm going to build the Mercedes-Benz and you give me the tire and you give me the engine and we would all work on that. But what you're saying is to develop micro startups or micro working groups that might generate these APIs that might connect to the platforms. But the problem here, in my opinion, is that many of the big agricultural platforms have been closed, not open. So with this ecosystem model, what you need to generate is these places like Accenture or the stock market in Rosario, where you can get together and develop innovation labs where people can kill the Excel. So this is an this is a problem that existed before COVID. So we can come up with many, many things to do, like Accenture or what Gabby's doing in Acrea, with the Crea Lab, that may generate these micro working groups that may be financed by angels. But the important thing here is to realize that problems are being fixed little by little with this digital innovation. Thank you. Juan Diego? Yes, Federico, with regards to your question. From Accenture, we are fully aware, or at Accenture, we're fully aware that the VCs are not the only financing source for our producers. And that's why it is important that the first idea we had at Accenture was to establish a fund. But the plan back then was not just to create this new fund, but to articulate the financing accounts that exist in the country. And I think that's why we have had such a good impact as a hub, articulating the financing sources at the different stages of the business. And of course, VCs are a very important player in these different types of financing resources. But we also have the private, the government, the accelerators, the incubators, the family offices, the BCs, the CBCs. They are all playing a very important role depending on the need and the impact that the startups may have. And then our task there, strategic task there is how to reach them so that this requirement for capital is there and the gap for capital is closed whenever we are dealing with a certain startup. Yes, thank you, Juan Diego. Excellent. Maybe Christian or Lina may have a question, another comment, because we have one more question here in the room. Well, so we're going to take the 3 questions we have here. Stanley, introduce yourself, please, and then ask your question. Can you hear me? Yes. Is Stanley Best from INEA, Chile? I'm in charge of the digital part of our institution. And something that happens in Chile, and something that has happened between connecting supply and demand. There are many startups that are working kind of dispersed without a structure. And it's hard for them to penetrate the market. And once they start talking to the entrepreneurs, they say, yes, yes, I know I need to adopt technology, but I don't have the people to do that. I don't have the people who might articulate this or can use this technology. So the question is, how do you, in, in this system where you're training people for the production of startups and developing so many great things, how do you connect that with a market that does not have the human skills that are needed and that are still being developed? So how do you talk to the policymakers about that? How do you talk to entrepreneurs about that in this space where you already need trained people? How do you see that?
Gracias, Stanley.
Thank you, Stanley. And then now the mic is open for the panel members. If you want to take this question, Tommy? Well, it's not like I want to answer all the questions, but I just can't help myself. I insist. Universities are still teaching MBAs. They're still training people for corporations. But the opportunity that we have in Latin America is to generate ag centers. And we are trying to generate that in Onkawa, and it's a huge challenge because many people look at you like, well, how can I help you? So I think that the main definition is to generate a context. If you don't generate a context for these things to happen, it's very hard for them to happen. We can talk about a before and an after. On October 18th, we'll be summoning all the ecosystems in Latin America of food tech to carry out a workshop to talk about this precise issue. So it would be very interesting, Stanley, if you were able to participate. This was sponsored. This is being sponsored by IDB and STEMGETS, and we're going to be giving scholarships for the smaller startups. So we think this is a systemic change, and this is a historic opportunity. So we need to foster education and the development of context and the support of governments. Today, Ag Center exists thanks to the initiative of the universities of Antioquia and the government of Antioquia. So it is important that whenever there is a model out there that maybe something that work and then maybe scaled up in other models in Latin America, then it's something that can be seen by the governments and also taken into consideration by the public and private investors. Well, thank you, Brian. We have Brian, Gabriel, and Miriam. And with that, we will close the round of questions. I ask you to please be concrete in your questions. Let's be efficient. Well, thank you, Brian Buya from Visuality SaaS. My question is, do you have any benchmark for a think tank? And what would be maybe the pathway for financing for this type of companies? Anybody would like to answer the question? Well, Brian, let me tell you the case of Colombia and the case of the region where we are, Antioquia. We have been working hand in hand with Ruta N, and a new innovation center that is being developed by the Georgia University in Medellin, where we're starting to develop and create from scratch, from the very idea, those opportunities for new businesses, closely linked to the main problems of the agricultural sector in Colombia that have already been identified and that are no different from the ones we see in Latin America. So those institutions have been joining us from the very idea developing processes. And the idea is to mature these businesses so they can have an impact. Thank you, Juan Diego. So if there are no other comments, I'll move on to the next question. Tommy, Lina, Christian, all you need to do is open your mics. Juan Diego, Gabriel? Yes. The question is for Juan Diego. You said something about the fact that you worked on the structuring and organization of the different investors. How was that process? The number of players that we identified here in Colombia was gigantic. And so that was the reason why Accenture was created. And we have more players, more investors, or financing sources, startups, and so on and so forth. So what we did was to support them in the traditional segmentation and the pre-seed stages of the companies. That is when they're taking an idea to a prototype, and that prototype is being validated in the market, and that validation is a successful one, and then they are going to then develop the first investment bets to make this a business in the market, and there's a chance for scaling up. So we're talking seeds. And so on this maturity of the businesses, we started mapping the different organizations from the very early stages. And that's where we have been able to identify the institutions of the government, the incubators, the accelerators, and then moving into the investment angels, and then the other businesses that are a bit more mature and more specialized and bigger, where you have the venture capitals, the corporate venture capitals, some family offices, and some investment angels that are a bit bigger. So thank you very much, Juan Diego. So we're moving to the next question. Last question. Maybe you can introduce yourself. Yes. I am the representative of a university, an agricultural university. At the university, entrepreneurship is a cross-cutting theme for all the majors. We have an entrepreneurship incubator. We have had some very, very good ones that have been rewarded. But still, this is a very interesting topic. And I like this panel because it has opened our eyes, because the seed capital is the hardest to get. I can see that you work with many countries, but Ecuador is not in the map of any of you. It would be interesting to have you, because I believe all the universities in the country has as a cross-cutting theme in their majors entrepreneurship. And so a few years ago, we were awarded a prize from Senesit with an entrepreneur of a helmet, motorcycle helmet. And it was interesting because if the person wearing the helmet had drunk some alcohol, the motorcycle would not start. So we were prized for that, and the financial corporation came to the university to offer some seed capital, but they needed some warranties. And because they are humble students, they couldn't get those. So I don't know if any of the panel members that are joining us today would be interested in saying something about this, telling us if you have any link with Ecuador and are interested in helping these students who want to become entrepreneurs. Well, would anybody like to mention any action with Ecuador, an opportunity? Yes, thank you. In our particular case, there's a leverage of finding that great talent is linked to the universities and organizations present in different countries. In Ecuador, we work with Impacto, which is an impact accelerator and also a fund. And we have been linked with different ecosystems that have allowed us to have those partners. But those partners have to be established, and we need to strengthen the relationships so that we can summon them from the accelerators and the funders. So we are maybe not reaching that entrepreneur and try to tell the entrepreneur what we're looking for and what is needed, because it's not only a matter of the presentation of the business idea, but also the process that is behind it. And so this is something that you need to develop and develop solutions. And in particular for this sector, as Thomas was saying, if you get to the venture capital, you have to have the idea that you are going to be growing fast, and that you will be leveraging on technology, and that you have an exciting time, because that's the way we work and that's the way that we get our returns. So the other day, I said that we need to become more involved with the ecosystem, and we need to train the entrepreneurs too, because being part of a venture capital is a decision. And that's why I believe we're open, and that's why we're members of this panel. So how to reach different organizations to talk about what we do and of how we're doing it and what we want to do in terms of innovation, to think in a different way and reach the entrepreneurs and help them develop amazing solutions. So I'm not going to give the floor to Thomas and Christian, because I believe they have much to say as well. Thank you, Alina. So two things that I believe to be very important. First of all, that this is work as a network, and that's why we are working with Christian and Lina and Juan Diego as a network. We cannot be in all places at all times. So last week we launched Mexico, is the 12th economy in the world. So again, we as an industry are still in diapers. And prizes, I've seen some entrepreneurs that get some sort of prize by a bank, but that's not what they need. And a phrase that really caught my attention in my life is that a good product with a bad team will not work, but a good team will turn around a bad product. So 90% of this has to do about teams, not products. We do not realize that the change is that this is a collaborative model. You can have, like, you can talk with, you need to talk to 4 founders of important level in the company. So we cannot pretend for this change of paradigm, which is the investment distributed through venture capitals. Well, you have things in books that cost $15, and it's not like you can download them for free, but you might. So this is something you can link startup communities, venture deals. You need to read those. $23,000 billion, $23,000 billion, or $23 billion were distributed in Latin America this year. And so we need to make them apt for a region, tropicalize them. So I say this with the best of intentions because we're doing it. So I believe this is a very important thing, a very important message. The opportunity that we have in Latin America, it would be a shame if we were to lose it. We need to execute the ideas. So I'm more than open to help you in whatever you may need. Thank you, Tommy. Christian, just to elaborate on what Lina and Tommy said, the fact of collaboration is key for networks. Lina and I work together in between Cube and Inogen. We have developing a strategy to be able to work with their accelerator and to be able to become their partners and an investor in the companies that they highlight. And we also have the private investments, Amuka, that I believe is quite new, but there are many interesting things there, both in Ecuador and in other countries that are interested in this Equatorian ecosystem. I think we see new ventures, Endeavor is there too. I believe it's worth approaching those ecosystems of investors that eventually will pull the founders. And as what Thomas was saying, the issue of teams, I'm in total agreement with that. And I would add something to that, the part of execution. Execution is everything. You may see a difference between a first-time founder that focuses on a product and second-time founders, they may focus on distribution. It's a different type of approach. It's a different type of acceleration to reach the goals. So that in AgTech is quite relevant because this is an industry that entails much patience. You cannot accelerate product. Coffee takes a certain amount of time to grow, 4 years. Others take 7. And so you just need to be patient. There are 1,000 pests, but there are also 1,000 new technologies that may be implemented for these new developments that Juan Diego and Tomas are financing in Latin America. And so hopefully we will be able to include Central American too. So a collaboration among associations, funds, ecosystems is key. And what matters the most here is to see how not to reinvent the wheel, but to use what already works and implement that in our countries. Thank you. Thank you, Cristian. Juan? So, Federico, just a quick comment. Yes, we have been working with some financing sources in Ecuador that are opening, enhancing, and widening our network. And I just want to let you know about this collaborative work between different public and private financing sources. I believe this is something that needs to happen from the very beginning, particularly with public financing sources when we do the first validations. And that is something that is often then sent to the private organizations that manage to accelerate those businesses. So I think that leads to great results. And we have some successful startups in Latin America have undergone a combination of said public-private financing resources. Yes, thank you very much, Juan. We were supposed to go to finish a while ago, and we know that our guests have some commitments and flights to take after this. So, as in general terms, I would just say, and if the panel members would like to say something else, just a word, we can open the mic again. But what I would say is that we generated a very interesting debate that helps us get to know each other better and for links to happen, connections to happen. There seems to be a consensus behind the stories told here. There's an underlying idea that Latin America and the Caribbean have a great potential in terms of the development of technologies that may solve problems for producers. But the idea is to have developed competitive companies within the market of the economy of knowledge, that there's great talent, that there's great energy for this to happen, that there are more monies, $23 billion in the past 3 years, that there are more initiatives, hubs, accelerators, incubators, ACTEX, and that what seems it, well, apparently we have made much progress, and then what we need to see is what's missing to continue on the right pathway and capture this potential that we have as a region. Tommy, we're missing banks, insurance companies, create, believe in the opportunity. We need to support many of the initiatives and the hubs that we're promoting. But mainly, I believe the great news here is that we have done much. And if we can visualize as an objective that ECA next year will be there, I commit to being there next year. Let's develop a plan with objectives. What would be the conclusions that we can draw as a group with all the talent that we have joined here? And what can be a deliverable within a year as an objective for this group? How can we potentialize what we have in Chile? What is happening with Juan Diego and Ecuador and in Santa Cruz de la Sierra? How can we have 50 ecosystems of AgTech in Latin America so that we can all get together once a year and see how we can become closer, become more optimistic, and work better? And there are many producers that may understand that they can be an agent for change. The reason why their sun may link back to the soil from a technological standpoint as a startup.
Muchísimas gracias, Tommy. ¿Algún
Thank you very
comentario
much, Tommy.
breve de-
Any brief comments from Lina, Christian, Juan?
Pues de mi lado, nada más que agradecerles por la
Well, I just
invitación
want to thank
al
you
Fondo Salvadoreño
for your invitation as a Salvadorian fund,
Es un placer,
a
un honor
Salvadorian company. It's been a great pleasure to be able to share the panel with the people here. So thank you.
A vos, Cristian,
Thank you, Christian.
valoramos mucho tu presencia.
We value your
Lina,
presence
Juan
here
Diego,
too.
¿algún último comentario?
Lina, Juan Diego, last comment?
Lina, bueno, pensé que ibas a hablar.
Lina.
No,
Okay.
de mi parte también agradecer.
Well, I just want to thank you as well.
Que lo que nos hace falta en estos momentos es
I think that what we're missing right now is to continue
que ya estamos
maturing
haciendo esas apuestas
what we're
de gobierno,
doing,
¿no? Son claves
what the
ese
government
pensamiento
is
colaborativo
betting on, to have a
que nos va a llevar
collaborative
qué bueno
train
que
of
los
thought.
gobiernos empiecen a ver, uno, esa
It's
oportunidad
good that the governments are looking at the opportunities and for them to see in the Latin American agricultural sector a true business,
verdadera opción
a true option
Productos Internos Brutos
to have an impact in their GDPs
lograr
in each of the countries and together attain the goals set forth. And together with Ag Sector, please get in touch with us. We are more than willing to work together with all of you. And thank you for the invitation once again.
Muchísimas gracias, Juan Diego. Y Lina, cerramos con palabras.
Lina? I just want to thank also for the opportunity. Let's think that this is not a short-term solution. We need to increase the production. And we need to increase birth of startups in time. And we also have climate change to deal with, among other things. So we need to we have to recognize each other in the ecosystem, the public, the private, and let's work together for the solution of specific problems. Let's plan an agenda so that we can all gather together so we can move forward, because this is not something that we will do for tomorrow, but in the long term. And let's understand how the US, Europe, and Africa work and learn from them and use that in our region. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Well, thank you very much.
Con algún minuto de demora,
With a few minutes of delay, we apologize
haber
to our
estado en el
guests
intercambio que se
and we
generó.
thank you for
Cerramos
being
por
here
hoy,
and thank those who
brevemente
participated.
tenemos unos
So we're
minutos
going to close this
de intervalo,
uh,
de
close this
networking,
panel.
recreo,
We'll have 20
y
minutes
luego
for a
volvemos a
break
estar para la
for your
sesión de preguntas y
networking
análisis.
and have some coffee, and then we'll continue. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.